life, living and making a living can sometimes wear you out, grind you down, and dull your senses. So, for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that will give you a better chance of success and happiness, take this time out to sharpen your axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Vern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. Vern, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about closing the sale, and you mentioned something last week that really intrigued me. You said that sometimes we need to ask for 3 favors.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's this is an interesting thing. I got into selling in 1955 as a dysfunctional accommodator. In other words, I had trouble working, and then when I did, I kept running into people who would say, "Let me think it over." And that seemed logical to me. I mean, that's a nice thing, you know, so you accommodate that. And they said, "Now, you come by on the 1st of the month, and I'll be sure to buy it. You can count on that." And I'd go by, and they wouldn't even let me get in. And I was pretty conscious of what was going on, and I kept agreeing to go back. And I honestly, Gina, I can't remember ever selling a back call. Probably made a couple hundred. Slow learner. You know, I mean, it took me a while. This just isn't working. And then I noticed that a few people made an occasional sale on a back call, but they weren't 1 out of 3. They were like 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 would buy on a back call. Now, the reason for this, of course, is that a quality diminishes and the price increases in the minds of the prospect once you're out of sight. I mean, when you're right there and you create this excitement and the aura about the product and you're there to answer their questions, well, the excitement is pretty high, you know. But there's a natural tendency for the person to want to postpone, procrastinate making the decision for fear of making a mistake or something else coming up. And so you understand that, so you say, well, okay, we'll check back. It was about, I guess, 6 or 7 years of that, and I'm embarrassed to admit to that, but I was making back calls. And I decided, well, I'm not going to make back calls anymore, because even if you were selling 1 out of 5, it takes just as long to sell a back call as it does a first call. So if I can sell 1 out of 3 first calls, why would I make back calls? I mean, it's just illogical. But it wasn't 1 out of 5, it wasn't 1 out of 10, it wasn't 1 out of 20, it was 1 out of hundreds.
Oh, my goodness.
That weren't really buying. And so I decided, well, I just wasn't going to make back calls anymore. And the consideration would come up, and I'd say, well, I understand how you must feel, but I just don't do back calls. Well, they'd get upset, and you know what I mean? So it didn't seem fair to tell them at the end if I wasn't going to come back. So I decided I'd tell them when.
At the beginning.
At the beginning of a call.
Why waste your time?
Yeah, that I wasn't going to come back. Now, you just can't say it that way. So I began to write a thing that I call the 3 favors. And I know what my intention was, but I wrote these things up, and I started using them, and they didn't work at all.
Oh, really?
And so I got confused about it, and I finally found a FOGG formula, F-O-G-G. It's a formula that you can plug in the number of words in a sentence and sentences in a paragraph and determine the grade level that you wrote it at, okay?
Oh.
And it turned out it was like 12th or 13th grade level. And so, which is, you know, too complex for the average person who was used to reading a newspaper or, you know, a novel, which usually is written about 7th or 8th grade level. So I, you know, fogged it down. I got it down and chopped the sentences up and what have you, and finally came up with a thing that I call the 3 favors, and started using them, and I couldn't believe the difference, couldn't believe the result. And what I'm going to do is going to run through this with you, and I'm going to do the 3 favors. And listen very carefully to them and see where we're going with this. This was, by the way, after I had prospected, established rapport, correlated the product and service, and decided that I was going to move forward with the presentation. Okay. What I would do is I'd say, Gina, I really thank you for working with me up to this point in time, but based on your response and your attitudes and what have you, I feel compelled to move forward and explain our product and how it might apply to you. May I do that? May I do that?
Sure. You may.
Yeah, and I wouldn't ask them unless they'd say yes. I don't think I've ever had them say no. And I said, before I get into it, though, I would like to ask you for 3 favors, none of which are to buy anything. Would that be all right?
Okay.
Okay. The first favor is that you please listen to and evaluate everything I say. And if you think for one moment that I've misrepresented or exaggerated or shaded the truth or perhaps stretched it a little, or if there's something you don't understand, or if you feel apprehensive about something, I'd like you to stop me right there. Would you do that?
You bet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, anything I'd said after that would be a waste of your time, wouldn't it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so please, if you would. The second favor is that you please try to keep an open mind. You see, you and I both know that I can't sit here and sell you on something that you don't need, don't want, and can't afford. Isn't that right?
Of course.
Yeah, and that's not my job.
Right.
That's not my job. What I'd like to do, however, is to explain this product and how its benefits might apply to you. And if you're as enthusiastic about it as we are, once you understand it, we'll invite you to participate. But I promise I'm not going to do or say anything that will embarrass or annoy you. Does that sound fair enough?
Sure.
Okay. And the third favor is that you please, please not embarrass me by asking me to come back later. You know, like tomorrow or next week, next month, or maybe even next year. Now, don't misunderstand me. I know I'd enjoy coming back for a visit and a cup of coffee if you'd had me. It's just that I'm committed to a policy that prohibits me from coming back into your home again with my application and materials and what have you, or meeting you at a coffee shop or anything like that. In other words, the principal reason for this is to avoid any possibility of harassment. So what I like to do is go ahead and explain the product, answer your questions as honestly and candidly as I can, and expect that you'll either say, Bern, this is wonderful, it's something we want for our family, or, Bern, no, this just isn't my cup of tea. And either way would be 100% okay with me. Would you do that?
So you're giving them permission to say no?
Yes. Now, what I've just done, in truth, is to give them all the authority. I give it all to them. I ask them to listen and evaluate and challenge. I ask them to try to keep an open mind. I admitted that I couldn't sell them something. See, here's what's happening. I gave them all the authority. Typically, people aren't used to having it, so what do?
They give it back.
They give it back. It's amazing. And if they don't, it's okay. And if they do, it's okay. See, either way it works, 100%. It's incredible. My closing ratios went from 1 out of 3 to like 8 out of 10. I've had some sales experiences where I went as much as 3 years with a product and never missed a sales call. But I was a good prospector. And when I made that presentation, I had a pretty good idea that they could afford it, they would benefit by it certainly, and that I had the authority and the ability sitting in front of me to make a decision. But with those 3 favors, what's really fascinating is that oftentimes at the end of a call, they would say, well, out of habit, they would say, well, I tell you what, I really like this and everything, but I would like to have a chance to think it over and like to have you come back the first of the month. And I'd have the spouse or a partner or something say, hey, no, you agreed not to do that, especially if they wanted to buy. You know what I'm saying? In other words, yeah. And so all I had to do was act embarrassed, and they would jump in and help clear that up for me.
Because they'd already had an agreement with you.
Yeah. And they would move forward. And now, if you use the 3 favors, and by the way, we'll embellish those and explain what's really going on there, but if you use the 3 favors, the only thing of it is you have to honor them.
Absolutely.
You cannot go back, no matter what the circumstances. And I've told people that if someone called me, say 2 or 3 weeks later, and said, Bern, we've thought about this, and we'd like to buy 10 sets, or whatever it is, whatever you're selling, that I would say, no, I'm sorry. Now, I'll have to send another agent by, and I'm sure you'll appreciate them and enjoy them, and they'll do a good job for you, but I'm not coming back. I would not go back. Because once you do, then that thing turns into a gimmick. It's not true anymore. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of power. Now, to use the 3 favors, you have to have confidence in your ability to communicate the idea, okay? But you don't have to have as much closing power, because that will take care of it. Now, why is it so effective? There's 27 affirmations in those three favors. 27 points of agreement. It's very subtle, but they're there. And one of the things that we're really working on here is the fact that, well, let me make an analogy. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to communicate, to try to persuade you to do something, even if it's for your own good, if we were surrounded here, this room was filled with balloons, and they were rubbing against each other and squeaking, they were between us and around us and what have you, and especially if you knew there were 2 or 3 or 4 doors that were ajar, that you could just kind of slip on over to and escape this foolishness.
What an analogy.
Yeah, that'd be pretty hard, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
And yet that's the way it is with sales calls sometimes. In other words, the balloons that are there on any sales call are preconceived ideas and notions about salespeople. For example, there's a lot of people out here feel that salespeople will misrepresent, and they'll exaggerate, and they'll shade the truth, and they'll stretch it, okay? So those are like balloons, and I have to bust them, and the way I bust them is to bring them up and to affirm to that person I'm not going to do that. See what I'm saying?
Clear the air, so to
Yeah,
speak.
exactly. So what I'm really doing in the three favors is busting balloons and closing doors. Now, some of the other doors are the doors that they escape from is I want to think about it. And that's the biggie, isn't it?
I
And
don't have the money now.
Yeah, it's hard to overcome that stuff. And so what I want to do is to bust the balloons and close the doors. And so when I say, please listen to and evaluate everything I say, and if you think for 1 minute that I have misrepresented, it's like taking a pin and pricking it, you know, bang, and then exaggerating, bang, shading the truth, bang, or stretching it, you know. I'm breaking those balloons, and then at the very end when I say, please don't ask me to come back, like, later, tomorrow, next week, or next month, I'm closing little doors. Now, I've also found, I mean, when you're rolling and you're making money and you can experiment verbally with things, I've had other people do it and I've done it myself. I've gone into a home and I would say, for example, please don't embarrass me by asking me to come back later, like next week, no, next year. Okay, we'll say that. Okay, and sure enough, any other call, they'd say next month. Because the subconscious mind will grab a hold of that little door and will use it if it's there available. It's just impressive. What we're really doing is establishing ground rules here for the sales call. And ground rules are important if you're not going to have discord. Now, for example, I remember when I was a little kid, we used to go over the school fence and play baseball in Plummer's schoolyard. Okay? And, you know, in baseball, if you hit a ball over the fence, usually it's a what? Home run.
It's a home run.
Yeah. Well, in our league, over the fence was out. Because you had to crawl over the fence, you had to go get this ball we had wrapped up with tape and what have you. It was more trouble than it was worth. You had to crawl back over the fence and get the ball back and play again. So over the fence was out. We also had a hole in the fence that normally if a ball would go through a hole in the fence, it's a double. Well,
Right.
if it went through this hole, it was out. Okay. Now, if we all agree on that, that's okay.
Right.
You know, you hit the ball over the fence, you're out. And you know, suppose there's a new kid comes in to play with you. You know, he's
And
from
he
out of
doesn't know
town,
the
and he doesn't know the
rules.
rules,
Right.
and he hits a ball over the fence, and everybody says you're out.
He's
You
like,
got a
"No
fist fight.
way."
Yeah,
Yeah,
you got a
right.
fist fight on your hands. And so, if you know the rules, people will play them well, and it's fascinating. Now, what I do at the end of a call, if indeed they are unable to make a decision, they want to move forward, they get really upset that I'm not coming back. That's been the experience. They just don't think that's right. And I said, well, I understand how you must feel, but it's just a commitment that I've made to prevent any possibility of harassment. Now, I tell you what you can do. If you feel you want to buy the first of the month, the first of the year, whatever they say, all you have to do is to call the company. All you have to do is call the company, and they will send, they'll send John Thompson. John's a delightful young man. He was married a couple of years ago, and he's making a living doing this. He'll really appreciate your business. Or they might send over Sadie. Sadie is a delightful young woman. She's enthusiastic and bubbly and gives great service, and I know that you'll appreciate her. They might send over Paul. Paul is a delightful young, you know what I mean? I just give it away, give it away. And they just don't understand that. And what they will do more often than not is say, wait a minute, how much did you say we could get that down for, or how much? Because here's the thing. If there's been an adoption, they won't let someone else have the business. If there's been no adoption, you don't have a sale anyway.
Right.
Remember the old adopter
Very
process?
true.
Yeah.
Very true.
And so by giving it away seems to work very well. I tell you, an ethic like that seems to work. I remember one time years ago, this was in Corpus Christi, Texas. I remember very clearly. And I'd gone down to the consult with another cutlery company, and we were out one day selling, and this fellow with me, his name was Duke Nesbitt, delightful guy. And we were working two sides of the street, and I'd gotten in to make this call. And the husband said, "Tell you what, Bern," he says, "take this one." He picked a paring knife, and this one, and the sharpener. You give me a price on that, and you got a sale. And I said, "Well, I just don't do that. I don't sell pieces because they're wonderful until you need to do another job and you're going to use this piece to do it. You might break the knife and you blame us." And I made a policy I don't sell pieces. And they said, "You mean you're going to say no to a sale?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess so." And they said, "Well, that's all I want. I'm not buying no set." I mean, real clear about it. And so I said, "Well, I understand. Oh, I got an idea. I'm working with a fellow named Duke, delightful young man, and he's supporting his family doing this and what have you, and I don't mind if he sells you pieces, and I know he will. Let me go ahead and call him." And I got up out of my seat and walked out on the porch, and there was Duke way down the street. And I said, "Hey, Duke," he got his attention. I said, "Come on, get your sample kit." And so he didn't know what was going on, so sure enough, he went to the car, got his kit, and came to the house. And I took him in, I introduced him, and I said, "These people want to buy these pieces, and you know what my policy is about it, so you can go ahead and get the order." He said, "Well, thanks." And he established some rapport. He sat down, he started writing it up. Okay. Now, I wouldn't be telling this story unless what?
Unless you made the sale.
Yeah, unless I made it. Yeah, they just wouldn't move forward. And the husband began to say, "Well, wait a minute now. How much did you say the whole set was?" And, the deposit and all that kind of stuff, and he bought from me. But it was that ethic, that standing with your guns that made the difference. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with the pieces. It's just that I've made a commitment to sell only sets out of respect to the product. It doesn't make me right, but it does give me some authority and some power when it comes to sets. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm sure it cost me some business, but it also got me a lot more. And I think those kind of things have to creep into any presentation. Now, we're talking about a one-call business here.
Right.
Which principally I have focused on because, of course, I'm prejudiced. I feel that the creative direct sale, and creative direct means that there's no market. People don't even know the product exists. And you come out of nowhere. You knock on their door, you call them on the phone, you get together with them, and you show them this product. So it's creative and it's direct to the consumer. Now, I've always felt this was the ultimate sales experience. That you knock on a door and you walk in and walk out an hour
Certainly
later.
A challenge.
Yeah, see,
Yes.
That's the way that works. And I went for 15 years, never followed a lead, never asked for a referral, never made a back call. I mean, there's only one way you can do that, and that's straight to the home, to the consumer, selling one call only. And it sure is simple. That cuts down the record keeping, I'll tell you, running all over the city, following references and this type of thing. However, we have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of our viewers are in developmental sales.
Right.
And I believe you are.
Absolutely.
And now, in some cases, these same principles can apply. Like, I know that if I had a product or a service that would justify a 2, 3, or 4, even a 5-call presentation. Like some products, you go in, you do an evaluation, then you go back and you compute what the solutions are, and then you take the solution back, and then there's another step perhaps in there somewhere. But you pretty well know if it's a 2 or 3 or 4 call sale. And so the 3 favors could be done in the very beginning. Say, now look, I don't expect an order today, although I would certainly accept one. You understand that. However, I understand that this is a developmental process. And this is the way that I'll propose we do it. And this is the way it'll work. And you explain the ground rules and say, is that fair enough? And once they agree to that, it's amazing how often you can make that work. If they adopt you, got to adopt you. Now, in developmental sales, there's another dimension. A relationship has to be established, and I think a lot of salespeople are shortcutting that. They're depending upon, coming in and saying hi, maybe bringing some candy once in a while, or I've seen that done a lot. But I'll tell you, there's certain things that seem to work. For example, Christmas comes around, people send Christmas cards, okay? Waste of time. Everybody sends Christmas cards. It gets lost in the shuffle. If you're going to send a card, make it like a Valentine's card, or better still, an anniversary. Now, find your client's anniversary date. Is he married? Find the anniversary date, find the age of his kids, and if you can start doing things like sending an anniversary card a few days before the anniversary, what have you done? You're exclusive. It's the only card they're going to get. Plus, if you send it to them a little early, you've reminded them of the responsibility to their spouse. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so they're going to remember you for the rest of their life on that one. See? Children, for example, if you can get in tune, if they have children, their children's names and their graduation dates, the events that they have in their life, and to celebrate those, along with that, that's what seems to make the difference. Now, is that a con? No. It's caring. It's understanding your client and what makes them tick. And it's also part of the process. There's a fellow named Harvey McKay wrote a book, How to Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive. And he talks about 66 points of data that a salesperson who's on a repeat sale, like they have a clientele they're working with, that they should know about their client and to celebrate with them, for them, do things with them and for them, this type of thing. And that seems to be what makes a difference. Because an envelope is an envelope is an envelope. You know, a condenser is a condenser is a condenser. And, I mean, how else are you going to compete unless you bond yourself with those people so that they want to give you some business? They'll find a way to do it.
Well, and I also think, you know, you need to send the Christmas card at Christmas time so that you're not the one who didn't send it. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to do what everyone else is doing, you can still make it different. Instead of just signing your name, you can say something personal about the person to the person. And that makes a difference, especially in the sales where you just get a signed name and you're lucky that it's not stamped.
I have a thing that I celebrate every year called Chance Day. It's fascinating. There's a book, Princes of Serendip, and this guy named Baca wrote the book, suggested that there is a date, August 7th, that is furthest away from all other holidays. You know what I mean?
Really?
Yeah, and it's August 7th, and he's called it Chance Day. And what it is that you send a Chance Day card to someone who, just by chance, crossed your path, made a difference, you know what I mean, in each other's lives and what have you. And I've had a grand time sending those out for several years. But I send the book, you know, like
so they understand the history of it.
Each year I send out 6 new ones, and then I try to go back and send a chance card or reminder. You know what I mean? And so it's a special thing, but it really works out pretty well. Because, you know, we cross paths with people who definitely influence our lives. And to be able to celebrate that moment and have a day to do it on Chance Day is kind of neat.
Well, we met by chance.
Oh, absolutely. Do you remember how?
Yes.
How? No. It was through a fellow named Conrad.
Right.
Yeah, delightful man. Yeah, and gee, I mean, you'll be a part of my memory bank for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Closing sales, a lot of it is opening. A lot of it is really wanting to get that job done. Do you have any questions or anything at all that pops up out of your experience that we might be able to develop in this?
Well, I think you were mentioning there are some differences between one-time sales and building relationships, repeat business, where you're sometimes competing with other people who are selling the same product in your market. And we were talking before the show about service. And you said you didn't think service made that big of a difference, or it's difficult to quantify service.
Well, no, what I was saying was that every company I encounter in their mission statement talks about the quality service. You know what I mean? And I wonder sometimes just what that means oftentimes. Like satisfaction guaranteed always seemed a little short to me. You know what I mean? That was when I talk in terms of guaranteeing. Like when I have people come to seminars or what have you, I said, we're not talking about satisfaction here. We're talking about exhilaration. We're talking about,
you go a step beyond, huh?
Yeah, in other words, if you're satisfied, knock
your socks off.
Yeah, if you're satisfied, let me know and I'll give you money back. I mean, we're talking about, wow, meaningful, worthwhile, forward-moving, something unique. I mean, if it's not that, I'm not satisfied at all. And of course, I give a double money-back guarantee. And the reason I do that is out of deference to people's times. See, to deliver my product, it takes a couple hours, you know, for an essay or whatever. And so if someone is not just, you know, really delighted with it, why, I give their money back and then I
Plus
pay them
the
for the
time
time.
they invested.
Sure. And I've had that since 1972, and it's been asked for only once. And in fact, in my first year, I had a fellow who kind of skulked around after the event, and I said, "Can we help you in some way?" And he said, "Well, I understood this was kind of like guaranteed." And I said, "Well, oh yeah, gee, I wish you'd have said something." And I gave him his check back, and I wrote another check to match it. And I said, "I'm sorry it wasn't fulfilling for you, you know." And I didn't ask for an essay or why or none of that stuff, because I think that's inappropriate. If you're going to guarantee something, guarantee it.
Guarantee it.
Yeah, don't have an essay.
Unconditional. And,
Yeah.
They'll prove it. You have to prove it to me why you didn't like it.
Yeah. The delightful part about that is about 4 days later, I got an envelope in the mail and had a little note in it. And he said, "I don't know if I was testing you or me, you know, but you won and so did I." And the 2 checks are in there.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it's that was kind of a neat thing. I still have the letter in my files.
That's wonderful.
So
How rewarding.
yeah,
It
he
really
had gone
is.
through the process and figured, nah, you know, it was okay. I thought maybe it's in another time, another place, and I think it's okay to address this. I thought maybe what might have happened there, not to be a cynic, but he might have given me a check that was insufficient. You know what I mean? And had embarrassed himself and wanted it and would send it back later. I don't know that that's true. It might have been that indeed he was testing me, and that
I
we
think
passed.
sometimes we do that.
Yeah.
And we don't maybe realize it ourselves.
Exactly.
Until we go home and ponder it.
I know one thing in closing, you got to have the fun of the close. I'm one of these people. My father certainly was one of these people. They want to be closed. I mean, we're not going to roll over and buy too easy, because we want to test the mettle of that salesperson and his patience and how much he knows. Because the person who asks a lot of questions, gives a lot of considerations, gets a lot of information.
We want to get our money's worth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get a lot of information and sometimes a better deal. And we may even be talking about that in the next week or so when we continue in this idea of visiting about closing. It's an exciting subject. And not any of it, I've never been accused of high pressure. None of this is applicable if you're not welcome and if there's no desire for the product. That's important. Gina, I want to thank everybody for watching us. We get so many people that stop us in restaurants and on the street. It's been so delightful.
It's great.
And if people want to call in, it's 1-800-661-3490. 1-800-661-3490. And we'll send you a schedule of the TV series and work out a free ticket for a live essay.
Wonderful.
And come and see us work live, because we have a good time.
And it's really an excellent opportunity for people to meet you in person, Bern, and get more of a flavor of what the show is all about and what your commitment is in people's lives.
Thank you. My name is Bern
Moses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bern.
Uh-huh.